Today is October 11th, 2005, and we are at the Warhawk Air Museum conducting a Veterans History Project interview in conjunction with the Library of Congress. Today we are interviewing Mr. Martin Luther. Welcome to the Warhawk Air Museum, sir.
Thank you.
Present in the room are myself, Sue Paul, I will be doing the interviewing, Mr. Martin Luther, who we will be interviewing, Al Musia, who is doing the photography work, and Judy Minger, who is training to become an interviewer for the Warhawk Air Museum's program. Sir, could you please tell us the year that you were born and where you were born?
I was born in 1921, September 4, in the little town of Mount Vernon, Tennessee.
And could you give us your current address?
It's 596 Northwest 14th Street, Ontario, Oregon, 97914.
Could you tell us which war or wars that you served in and what division of the military you served in?
I served in World War II, the Berlin Airlift, if you consider that that was not a war, but and the Korean War.
And what division of the military did you serve during those wars?
Air Force during World War II, 15th Air Force, and I served in the Korean War as a part of MATS, Military Air Transport Service.
Thank you. Martin, could you tell us what it was like growing up in the little town of Mount Vernon, Tennessee?
Well, it was a very remote area of eastern Tennessee, beautiful area. We grew up on a farm, basically. We moved into a little town of Madisonville, which had a total population of about 900 folks. And that's where I went through school at Madisonville and through high school there.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have two brothers and I have two sisters. They're all deceased.
And where were you in the mix?
I'm the baby.
You were the baby. And your the oldest sibling was how much older than you?
Probably 25, 30 years, maybe.
You really were the baby. What did your father do for a living?
My father was in the House of Representatives in the state of Tennessee for 18 years. He was also a businessman, and he had cotton gins and did a lot of processing of cotton and cottonseed in East Tennessee and Georgia.
So in high school, all through your high school years, did you have a particular interest? Something that you liked doing the most?
Well, yes, I actually was interested in agriculture, and then, matter of fact, I took 4 years of agriculture in high school. But I never really applied it later on, but that was my main interest.
Any sports that you were
Yeah, I played football. They used me for the football more because I was about 90 pounds soaking wet. But anyway, I tried it.
Did you have any interest in flying when you were in high school?
Not in high school, but soon after I was out of high school, I started flying, and after I'd moved to Trona, California.
Why did you move to California?
Moved out for a job at American Potash and Chemical Corporation in the little town of Trona. My brother was there, and he had gotten me some interviews, so I took a job there.
What year was that?
It was 1938.
Had you, and you were what, 18, 19 years old then?
18 years old, yeah.
Had you in 1938, were there any rumors of a war coming, or any indication that in a few years that would be happening?
That wasn't my concern at that particular point, no.
Were you aware of Charles Lindbergh's accomplishments?
Oh, yes, yeah. We actually learned to fly there in a little airstrip on the edge of Searles Lake, which is a dry lake, flying an old Stinson SM-8A and an old fabric airplane. So.
Is that what you got your license in?
I never got a license. I had a private, I was ready to get my private when I went into the Army and went into the aviation cadet program, pilot training in the Army.
Did you do that before the attack on Pearl Harbor?
So that was after Pearl Harbor. I went into the Army on, I believe it was 9 November 1942.
Where were you December 7th, 1941?
I was skiing with Dave McCoy at McGee Mountain in the Sierra Nevada mountains up out of a little town of Bishop.
How did you hear about it up in Bishop?
On the way back to home at Trona, we stopped at the little Kitty Lee Inn, which was a kind of a watering hole there in Bishop. And then the news came out that we had been attacked.
How did you feel about that when you heard the news?
Very concerned and very, I don't know if you would call it depressed or not, but very concerned.
Mm. How long did it take before you decided to join the military then and get into the war?
Well, it took not too long. I was on a deferment with the company I worked for, American Potash and Chemical Corporation. And I finally got the deferment waived, and that's when I joined the Army in 1942. And
you wanted to be a pilot? You wanted to go into the pilot program?
Yes, I took the examination I went into the Army at old Fort MacArthur at San Pedro, California. Took the examination for the Aviation Cadet Program, passed it, and was assigned to the Central Training Command at San Antonio, Texas. Took my free flight at San Antonio, took my primary at the little town of Corsicana, Texas, my basic at Greenville, Majors Field, and advanced twin-engine advanced at Ellington Field, Houston, Texas.
In order to get into the Army Air Corps program, the flying program, were there any requirements that you had to meet? Or were they just taking everybody that they could to mobilize?
No, I was just on the changeover from requiring a college background or maybe even a degree to if you could pass the SAT score, which I was able to do. And you could qualify that way. What
about your brothers, your siblings? Did they go into the military also?
My oldest brother was in the Marines in the, a long time ago. I would go in the Guatemalan campaign back many years ago. My other brother was never in the military.
So your training, what types of airplanes were you trained in during the basic and the primary?
In the primary, we were flying PT-17s, which is a Stearman, and then also PT-19s, which is a Fairchild. Stearman was a biplane, the Fairchild was a monoplane, low engine.
Did you want to fly fighters or bombers? Did you care?
I actually wanted to fly bombers. Flew BT-13s at basic training, AT-9s and AT-10s in advanced training, and then went to transition into B-24s at Liberal, Kansas.
What did your father and mother think about your joining the Army Air Corps?
My father was deceased. My mother was very proud that I had done that.
Was America in a, what frame of mind was America in at that point, as you recall the home front here?
Very positive frame of mind, and let's go get this thing done, and whatever it takes to do it, let's do it.
Where were you, what air base, when you were finally assigned the bomber group that you went into?
I was at Liberal, Kansas, and then we went to Topeka, Kansas, and there's where we assembled our crew there in Biggsfield, El Paso, Texas.
Was that your first experience in a B-24?
Liberal, Kansas was, yes.
What'd you think of it?
It was an awesome airplane. Pretty big airplane for this old farm boy.
The crew that was assigned to the bomber with you, is that the crew that went overseas with you?
Yes, it was.
What was the name of your B-24?
The one went overseas with, we lost on its 22nd mission. It was shot down. It was called Flak Happy. And we then acquired another airplane called the Rackenjammer.
This is the crew that you flew with?
Yes, it is.
And this is a picture during World War II, and then of course you all look exactly the same 65 years later. It's a great picture. What was the average age of your crew?
About 19 to 20.
That's about where you were?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Where did you land when you left? Well, where did you go by way of, what, Greenland? How did you go over?
No, we went to Europe by way of the southern route. Went out of Topeka into Gitmo, Guantanamo, and then on down to Belém, Dakar, and then across, rather, from Belém to Dakar, northwest Africa, overflying the Ascension Islands, which is the southernmost route to Africa, and then went from Dakar around to Casablanca, Marrakech, and then on up into a little town of Stonora, Italy, which is in the southernmost part of the boot. Stonora was about on the same latitude as Bari, which was a major port on the Adriatic side of Italy.
And you were the pilot of the B-24 that you flew?
Yes.
When you landed in Italy, did you know what your missions were going to be? Or was it in Italy that you received those assignments?
Well, we would get an assignment, we'd get a briefing for each mission. We didn't know from one day to the next what mission we were going to fly next.
What kinds of missions did you fly?
We flew many different missions to marshalling yards, to oil refineries, to railroad yards, to manufacturing plants, to aerodromes. We flew missions to northern Italy, to France, to Bavaria, to Germany, to Hungary, and to Romania and the Balkans.
And so there, you were, how many missions in all then in the months that you were there?
I flew 50 missions. After a mission on 2nd of July 1944, our crew was pretty well, well, my ball gunner was killed and on that mission, and my tail gunner had lost a leg and had 9 compound fractures in his left leg. And my flight engineer and radio operator both had major injuries to their legs in the waist gun positions.
What was that mission? What was that flight?
That was, we were bombing the Shell oil refinery at Budapest, Hungary. And we got hit by anti-aircraft fire and ME-109 fighters.
How many other B-24s were with you during that mission?
We had a max effort in our squadron. We had 10-ship squadron that day, and we were bombing in a box formation, which gave us better accuracy and pinpoint accuracy. Out of the 10 ships in our squadron, I think there was 2 of us got back to Italy.
That's pretty devastating.
Yeah.
Your ship was in pretty bad shape, wasn't it? And
Yeah,
you were
we
coming back
well,
in.
We were pretty well shot up.
And how come you were able to stay airborne, that you didn't need to get out?
Well, the decision was made to stay with the airplane rather than bail out, mainly because of the condition of crew members who would not have survived a bailout. We made the decision to attempt to get back to Italy.
What was that like for you as the pilot of the plane?
Well, I think it was the right decision, and I think it was a decision that had to be made. We could have Some of us up front could have bailed out and survived, I'm sure. But I felt good that we were going to make it, thanks to the expertise of my navigator and navigating us around the hot spots and on our way back to Italy, avoiding the heavy concentration of anti-aircraft fire and fighter intercept.
You have something that you've written here that says our aircraft, the Rack and Jammer, was also severely damaged from flak and from ME-109 20mm fire. The decision was made to attempt to return to our base in Italy. We had no hydraulics, no flaps, no brakes, and a hole in the right main tire. The fuselage was split from the tail turret to the deck at the waist gun position, and part of the left vertical stabilizer had been shot off. We managed to land at Foggia, Italy, Foggia, Italy, using chest pack parachutes lashed to the waist gun mounts for braking. That's pretty incredible. That plane took you home with all of that damage done to it. Did you have any idea that that much damage was done?
Pretty much, because I had left my position and went back through the bomb bay into the tail section of the airplane to assess the damage back there, and assisted in getting our ball gunner up out of this turret, which he was pretty well mutilated, and we had to get him out of the turret, get down into the turret and crank it up and get it up in the retract position so we could land.
Was the mission successful? Were you able to take out the oil fields that you wanted, or the refineries?
It was highly successful. As a matter of fact, our group received a Presidential Unit Citation for that mission.
Did any of the other crew members of the other B-24s survive going down? Were they taken POWs?
Well, I'm sure that some of them ended up in one of the Stalags prison camps, but specifically I don't know what their survival rate was.
What was the first mission where you actually had combat fire, where you actually were in combat because of what you were flying over or what you were doing?
Some of the early missions were up into the Po Valley area of northern Italy, and before we had, as the Army, 8th Army was moving the Germans north up the peninsula, we hit some of those targets early on, and then we started reaching out into, I think the longest mission we ever had was to Black Hammer, Germany, which was very nearly in the Berlin parameter. And we hit a lot of the oil refineries in Romania and Hungary and through there. Another notable mission was, which we got a Presidential Unit Citation for, was Wiener Neustadt, Bavaria. It was a manufacturing plant there. And we had a rather high loss ratio on that mission, but again, we were cited for our effectiveness.
How many planes went in with you on that?
We had probably a 40-ship formation. Yeah.
And how many of those came back with you?
Our loss ratio group-wise, I think, was probably about 85%.
And why was that target so important?
It was a manufacturing plant that supplied parts and machinery for the Luftwaffe, and we needed to neutralize that. Early on in the theater, in the 15th Air Force, the only fighter escort we had was P-38. And the P-38 really didn't stand up to the ME-109 in combat, actually, in fighter conflict. But it was very comforting to see them there. We eventually got P-51 fighter escorts in the theater. As a matter of fact, these were the first black squadron of airmen called the Muskegee Airmen. They were assigned to the 15th Air Force up from Africa. They were originally in P-40s, I believe, and they upgraded to P-51s, and they did a great job. We had some escort from them, and as a matter of fact, my crew is credited with 11 kills of German Me-109 190 type aircraft, and 3 or 4 probable.
What was that like to see the Me-109s coming at you and around your plane pretty fast, I imagine?
They do a great job. They were very professional at it. My experience with the contact with the Luftwaffe, it was done according to the rules of warfare. They respected us, we respected them. They would put us under heavy attack when they'd run out of ammunition or low on fuel. They'd break off, and we could then breathe a sigh of relief and hopefully avoid the heavy concentrations of any aircraft.
Did you have P-38s follow you all the way into the oil fields, or were you left on your own at some point?
P-38s would reach all the way to the oil fields and get back, and so did the 51s with drop tanks. They could range out that far.
Do you remember the sight of the oil fields exploding when you were on that particular raid?
Oh yeah, we have strike photos that shows the explosion of the oil supply depot and the refineries themselves.
Were there Norden bomb sights on board the B-24s?
Oh yes, yeah.
Which were very effective bomb sights. Yeah. You have a magnificent collection of ribbons and medals, and I'd like to know a little bit about those and why you received them. It's a very honorable collection. Makes me very proud to be in the same room with you, frankly. Could you tell us about those and why you received them?
Well, the first one, you'll have to bear with me that I don't see very well, but my recollection is the first one is a Silver Star, which I received for the mission over Budapest, Hungary, July 2nd, 1944. The second one in the row is the DFC, and I think there are 3 oak leaf clusters. That's a Distinguished Flying Cross. And I got those for one for Wiener-Neustadt and one for Budapest. Also I got DFC for that mission. And
the Purple Heart is also
Purple Heart. Excuse me. The Purple Heart was a flak injury over Budapest, Hungary, on July 2nd.
Did you have a lot of flak during these missions?
Oh yes, yeah.
It's pretty treacherous stuff, huh?
Pretty accurate too. They were very good with it. 88 millimeter. The next one I believe is the Bronze Star. I got the Bronze Star for flights into Haggeroo in what is known as the Frozen Chosen. We were evacuating Marines out of the in Korea.
This is during the Korean War?
Mm-hmm.
So you would land there and
yes.
Pick up the Marines and take them out?
Right. The only airplanes we could get in there was the old C-47s, the old Goonie birds. And we could, they hogged out an airstrip on the side of the mountain with a blade on the front of a tank. And we could get 3 airplanes on the ground at a time. And we evacuated wounded Marines and flew in, excuse me, supplies and ammo for them. So. I don't know where we are here now.
It's a magnificent collection. What is this one for? Right here. It's a very large one with the blue striped. That's
Is
your
that the Korean
yeah.
service medal?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And we'll talk a little bit about your experience in Korea a little bit later on in the interview, and that's a magnificent medal from that. It's a beautiful collection.
The others are European Theater of Operation campaign ribbon, and then there's 7 battle stars on there, I believe. And Then there's the Occupation Medal of Germany, and with the airlift clasp on it, which we flew the Berlin airlift, virtually fed the Berliners for a year and a half during the blockade. So.
By the end of your 50 missions, you'd been at war in combat for how long? How many months?
We're in Italy just about 12 months.
You must have been pretty war weary, pretty tired.
Yeah, we came back to the States, went to 2 weeks R&R at Santa Monica Redistribution Center for and then reassignment to the training command. I was reassigned to B-24 as a B-24 instructor.
What year was that?
That was in 1945. Yeah, 1945.
But before the war had ended?
We came back in April of 45, and I believe the European war ended in May of 45, if I'm correct.
And you had no worry about going back over to Japan?
I was out for a short period of time on inactive duty, flying commercially, domiciled at Washington National Airport in Washington, D.C. And I happened to go out and call my old boss that I'd worked for on the Berlin airlift at Andrews Air Force Base, and he invited me out to lunch. And about 3 martinis later, he said, "You want to go to work?" And I said, "Sure." And I was pulling a gear up on a C-54 heading for Japan on 30 days TDY. And about 2.5 years later, I get back to the States. He knew that Korean thing was coming down. I didn't. So.
Tell us about how you became involved in the Berlin airlift.
Well, there again, I was flying out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
And what year was this?
Dayton, Ohio. That was in 1948. Is when the blockade came down, and I was flying C-54s on a run out of Dayton, Ohio into Washington up to Mitchell Field on Long Island, into Westover, and back down the East Coast to Langley. So because I was a C-54 driver, I guess they wanted all the 54 pilots they could get their hands on for the airlift. So I was assigned to the Combined Airlift Task Force headquarters under General Tunner at Wiesbaden as a staff operations officer, and I flew line flying out of Y-80, which was Wiesbaden, and Rhine-Main and Frankfurt, Germany.
You had obviously made a decision to stay in the military after World War II ended.
Well, I really enjoyed the military myself. I had some good duty and I had some very bad duty. But the main reason I got out was because of my family. We have 4 children. And my wife is the mother of all 4 children. She's been my wife for 63 years. I don't think she's going to throw me out now. So.
Well, in 1945, when Japan surrendered and the war was over, you had the option of leaving the military, but you chose to stay in. Did you want it to be your career at that time?
Yes, would have liked to have had a full career in the military, but because of personal.
Were you
family.
married at that point?
Oh, yes.
When did you meet your wife?
We were married in 1942. January 42.
Before you left for combat, then, you were married?
Yes.
And what is your wife's name?
Shirley.
Shirley. So you'd met Shirley and you all had married, and did you have children during World War II? Were any of your children born?
Our oldest daughter was born while I was still in pre-flight training at San Antonio. Our second daughter was born while I was in Italy. And then our next child, our son, was born 2 years later after I got back from Italy. And then our youngest son was born 2.5 years later after that.
So you were gone for a full year in full combat, 50 missions, without seeing your family then, other than mail whenever you received it. And so when you came home, it must have been quite joyous for you to be reunited with your family.
Very joyous, yes.
And so you stayed in the Air Force, though, and then what was it like to make the switch over mentally from the Russians being our allies during your World War II experiences, and then, of course, becoming the enemy, almost immediately following the end of the war, and then your experience in the Berlin left?
Well, I think it was a case of, as Kipling would say, trust in all men, but none too much,
Very well put. Could you tell us about the airlift, what that was like for you, and what you did?
It was a great experience. It was one of the best humanitarian things we had done in a long time. That did more to cement relationships with the German people than anything we did before or now. It was kind of ironic, we bombed hell out of Germany during the war, and then we'd turn around and feed them, which is typical of the American way.
Why were we doing the Berlin airlift?
Because the Russians had blockaded Berlin. Berlin was an island in the east zones of under the control of Russia, and it was let's see, what was there? A British sector, a French sector, an American sector, and the rest of it was East Germany and under Russian control. They were trying to starve us out of Berlin.
Do you remember when the wall was put up? The Berlin Wall?
Yeah, I think that was 47, was it? 46?
And so your job was to drop food?
No, we landed and delivered food to the three aerodromes or three airports in Berlin. Tegel, which was in the French sector, Gatow, which was in the British sector, and Tempelhof, which was the American sector. We operated out of basically 4 airports on the west zones, British, French, and American zones. We operated out of an airport, Fossberg, in the British zone, Celle in the French zone, and we operated out of 2 airports in the American zone, which was Frankfurt, Rhine-Main, and Wiesbaden, Y-80. We had 3 corridors into Berlin. There was a south corridor which we fed from Y-80, Wiesbaden, and from Rhine-Main, Frankfurt, into that, mainly into Tempelhof Airport. And then we exited back out the center corridor and back into the zone. The north corridor was mostly flown by flights out of Fossberg and Celle.
Was there much MiG activity? Did the Russians have, what kind of planes were they?
They were flying
defending?
MiGs, and they used to harass us. They never really pressed it too much, but they did harass us. We flew very strict controlled airspeeds and very controlled conditions. Excellent accident rate. We had a very low accident rate. We operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow. Why did the lift stop? Why did that program stop?
The Russians decided we weren't going to give in to their demands, so they lifted the blockade.
And where did you go then in your assignment?
I came back to the States and was assigned to MAT's headquarters at Andrews Air Force Base.
What does that mean, that type of headquarters?
Military Air Transport Service.
Okay.
And I wrote war plans in support of the deployment of SAC in the event of a all-out war. From the transport aspect of it.
Where were you trained to do that? To write those things?
We trained as we went.
From experience?
Yes. I wrote some of the early staff studies on aerial refueling, which are still pretty much employed today. The old probe and drogue system.
Did you experience that? Did you go through that? The fueling in the air?
Oh yeah, yeah. Had to go out and get a little OJT.
Did you fly jets?
I got some jet time just before I got out. We had T-33s assigned for MIT, which is minimum individual training requirements at Andrews. I got checked out in a T-33, sweet airplane. We flew combat support missions in Korea. We dropped the 82nd Airborne at Incheon, and we flew lots of resupply missions into the combat zone in Korea, yes.
How was Korea different from World War II for you?
I was in more of a support category in Korea, flying transports, not direct combat in the sense of going bombing or strafing a target, which was different than the direct support that we were in during World War II.
What about America's attitude toward the two wars? How did those differ, or did they differ?
Well, I think they differed considerably. The attitude of America during World War II was an attitude of camaraderie among the military as well as among the civilian population. We wanted to do it, we were determined to do it, and everybody got behind the effort to do it. They believed in what we were doing, as compared to Korea's when we started getting too divisive in our attitudes towards what America stands for and what we want to do.
What about the leaderships of the two experiences that you had? You had different leaders in each one of those wars, and I'd like to know if you admired one or more during World War II that you thought were, and then the same thing with Korea, our military leadership.
I'd have to say that I had more admiration for the leaders in World War II than I did for Korea or any of the wars since then. I think, although I had quite an admiration for our president at the time of the Berlin airlift, his determination to make that Berlin airlift work, and that was Harry Truman. And I didn't agree with what he did in firing MacArthur. I thought MacArthur was a great general. But it's too bad the politics got in the way of that war.
And General Patton? General
Patton was quite a field commander. I had a lot of respect for him.
What about Dwight Eisenhower?
Same.
You really did serve under some of the great people, didn't you?
It's a great honor.
After Korea, after you came home from Korea, did you stay in the military then for a length of time?
Stayed in the military until, I think, January 1954, in which time I got out and went on inactive duty and have stayed there since. So.
And how long did you stay on inactive duty?
Well, I've been on inactive duty since 1954.
Okay. What did you decide to do for a career once you made the decision to leave the military?
Well, I had headed out on an airline pilot career, but I was at the age, I was over 28 years old, and the airlines won't talk to you if you're over 28 at that time, and because of the retirement, mandatory retirement ages that were in effect at that time. I did get checked out and qualified for Pacific Southwest Airlines must have been 1954, and would have been domiciled in Phoenix, Arizona. At the same time, I had resumes out. At the same time, I got an offer from Douglas Aircraft Company to go to work with Douglas Aircraft. Having had some writing experience and staff study work and things in the military, I ended up in writing flight handbooks for Douglas-built aircraft.
So you were able to take the knowledge that you had and the experiences that you'd had into your private career.
Oh, definitely, yes. Yes.
And so tell us about what you wrote. How were those used?
Well, a flight handbook is the Bible for a pilot to operate an aircraft by. It has, I think, there's 10 sections in it that vary from familiarization of the aircraft itself to operation of the aircraft under different conditions.
And what aircraft did you write those for?
I wrote flight handbooks for the B-66 program, the C-124, the
These are all military aircraft.
Yes,
yeah.
And also I wrote flight handbooks for the DC-8, which was the first pure jet that Douglas built.
Are those still used with those aircraft? I mean, if those aircraft are pretty much obsolete today, but
Yeah.
they're still with those airplanes, though. Yeah.
And then
Did you get to sign your name?
I beg your pardon?
Were you allowed to autograph them at all?
No, these were printed in multiple editions. So after the aircraft thing, I went into missile program. Again, with Douglas, I went out to Vandenberg, which at that time was old Camp Cook at Lompoc, California.
And you were a civilian?
Yeah, I'm still a civilian. And I wrote launch procedures for the Thor missile program, which was one of the first, it wasn't an ICBM, it was an intermediate ballistic missile, you know. We staged them in the UK. And then after that I went to work with Martin Company on the Titan program.
And what is the Titan program?
It was again an intercontinental ballistic missile. It was a Titan 1 and Titan 2 programs.
Were these top secret programs at the time?
Biggest part of it was top secret, yes.
How exciting for you.
Very much so, yeah. I enjoyed it. I worked out of Denver, a good part of it, and then commuted to Los Angeles, and then, of course, Vandenberg Air Force Base.
So you retired from the active duty, but you stayed in military contractual programs for your whole career.
Just about, yeah. And then in 1974, I became a car dealer.
Okay.
So don't hold that against me.
How did that happen? Where were you living at that time when you actually fully retired?
I was living in Laguna Beach, California.
And your children were grown at that point?
Yes.
And what did you and your wife decide you wanted to do with the rest of your life?
Well, we were still out casting around, I guess, and my brother got me into the Chrysler Dodge Jeep car business in the little town of Bishop, California, which is up near Mammoth Mountain ski area. And so we decided to open a car dealership there, and I was the, quote, lucky one that bought out my brother's shares of the company and went on with it ourselves for 39 years, and we closed it 2 years ago.
My gosh. And your wife worked with you in the business?
She worked with me a good part of that time, and then it was quite an experience.
Were you able to take what you learned in all those years of manuscript development and manual development, et cetera? Were you able to apply any of that to? Did it just naturally feed into your new career? I mean, it was a full-time career that you.
Yeah, I'd say yes, very definitely. Yeah.
How did you get to Boise, Idaho?
Well, we actually live in Ontario.
Oh, in Ontario, Oregon. Yeah. Excuse me, it's right next to
our
the border
youngest
here.
son lives in Ontario. He has a business there. He's been there for some 34 years, I guess. So we wanted to get to know our children again, and we had to have another son who lives in Portland. He flies air ambulance out of Hillsboro, and we have a daughter up in Orofino, Idaho. And our youngest daughter, who was the one that was born in Italy, was in Williamsburg, Virginia. Her husband's a professor there at William and Mary.
And do you have grandchildren?
I have 10 grandchildren and 9 great-grandchildren.
My word. You know, you have had an incredible life. Coming from a little tiny town in Tennessee, probably never in your life ever expecting that your life would go where it went, or that you would learn what you learned or became what you became. Before we finish today, I'd like to know if you would tell us what thoughts you would like to leave for those 10 grandchildren and great-grandchildren about what your experience is as an American veteran fighting for our country, being a part of such incredible historical programs for our country, what lessons you learned that probably helped form you become the man that you are today. What would you like to leave for them? What thought that you'd like for them to always have?
Well, I feel very blessed in having been able to experience the things that I have experienced. I think the thing that you need to do is to just establish some goals and work towards those goals and try to avoid the pitfalls of those that would put down our country and those that would destroy us as individuals. Just maintain a good, solid attitude and keep raising the bar and don't lower it.
You started off born in a little tiny town in Tennessee, and from there you moved to California and joined the Army Air Corps and fought an incredible battle for the years of World War II and saved men's lives and helped make this country what it is today, giving us the freedom that we have today to enjoy as an American warrior, really. And then you stayed in the military and continued to write and create programs for our country's missile programs, and you participated in a tremendous humanitarian relief program with the Berlin Lift, and continued on into Korea to help preserve freedom for this world, and then, as I said, the missile program. And then to retire and for the next 30 years plus have a very successful business. I would say that you are quite an individual, quite a man, and we believe that you are a wonderful veteran for our country, and we value you so much. Thank you so much for coming here and allowing us to preserve this history forever.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
It's an honor to have been with you today.
Thank you. you.